Hi everyone, welcome back to my wicked cool workshop. My name is Kristen and this is Oscar.
Graham!
Oscar? That wasn't very nice. Sorry, he only likes worms. Today, we're gonna be diving into a wickedly fun project that's gonna bring some grouchy magic to your door. As you may have guessed, we're gonna be making an Oscar the Grouch themed wreath. This wreath is going to have a trash can, Oscar, a sign that says Scram, and of course his favorite worm, Slimy. This wreath is gonna be perfect for warding off any of your unwanted visitors. Oh, and one more thing, I'm gonna be raffling off this wreath to one of my Patreon members. So let's start trashing up the place. So the first thing we need to talk about is trash.
Oh, I love trash!
Specifically, trash cans. The size of the trash can you pick will affect the rest of the wreath, meaning it will affect how big you make your Oscar or how big you make the wreath itself. And I just wanted to show you, you can make it in any size. Look how cute this little guy is. I'm not gonna use him this time, but maybe next time. For this project, I'm planning on using this cute little trash can that I got off of Amazon. Obviously, it's just one of those foot pedal trash cans, but I'm going to tear it apart and make it look more like it's part of Sesame Street. Now I'm gonna decide how to make Oscar. One option actually is to not even make an Oscar. You could just go and buy a plushie of him and put him in the trash can, or even buy a plushie where the trash can's already done for you, and then voila, you're all done with your Oscar part. There's actually two options for this. Okay, the first option is you could take a styrofoam ball like this, and obviously this one's way too big for this trash can, but this is just an example so you know what I'm talking about. You can take a styrofoam ball, cut it in half, use wires to prop it up so he looks like, you know, Pac-Man style, and then just cover the ball with some green shag and you have an Oscar. Most of you should do this option. It will be a lot easier and I'm gonna show you how to do it, but I'm actually gonna pick option number 2 for this wreath. Option number 2, I'm gonna take the pattern for this puppet, shrink it down and make a photo puppet. This is my secret ingredient. This is how I get the puppets on every wreath that I make to look good. I just make a puppet. So now that we understand what's the most important part that you have to get for this wreath, let's go backwards and start working on the wreath base. So after testing it out, I figured out that the trash can fit in a 24-inch grapevine wreath base the best. The first thing you're going to want to do is hang up your wreath base, go around and clip off all the little extra twigs sticking out everywhere. They're just super annoying, and trust me, it's better to do it now than later. Now with the wreath cleaned up, I can start adding the fairy lights. All I do is I take a pipe cleaner, tie the battery box to the wreath, and then wrap the lights around the wreath. This part could take forever. It really is a long, boring part, so I just like to put on some tunes and hang out. I just love her. So I'm not gonna make you watch this whole process, and with the power of editing, huzzah, all the green lights are in place. Now to move on to the next tedious step, painting all the silver wire. Though really annoying, it does look the best when you do this. Now I'm gonna let it sit overnight and dry before working on the next part. Good morning, it's the next day and the wreath is now done and dry. As you can tell, the lights being painted was an important part because now it just kind of blends in and looks great. So now that we're done with the base, we can move on to making Oscar. Okay, let's talk about the styrofoam ball method. My suggestion would be to get a ball that's slightly smaller than your trash can. Obviously this one's too big, so I'm not going to use this today, but I actually found the perfect size for this trash can, so I'll show you on this one. So let's get you a better view.
That's enough. Normal view.
Normal view, normal view, normal view, normal view.
Where's my Mystery Science Theater 3000 fans at? That's actually a really big mouthful. Anyways, what I really like to do is find a good picture of the way you want Oscar the Grouch to be positioned, and then take that picture and draw out his mouth. Here is the one that I'm using, which as you can see, his mouth is mostly on the lower half. So after drawing it out with a Sharpie, I just cut it out with an X-Acto knife. Then I just line the mouth with some black felt that I hot glue in place. And once the glue is cooled, you can just cut off the extra fabric. Then you can just start gluing your green fur into place. I bought my fabric specifically from a puppet fabric site called Puppet Pelts, and it's perfect for Oscar. Sorry for the really bad angle, but I wanted to show you this pro tip, which is using a razor blade to cut the backing of any of the fur that you're cutting. It is way less messier, and then it also keeps the fur intact. And I'm just gonna take that piece of fur and slowly work it around the ball with some hot glue to put it in all the little places and cut any extra off. Now I'm gonna take a thick piece of wire and bend it into a stand. That way it sits inside the trash can and I can push the head onto the top of it. This works perfectly for his head to stay in place. Now I can take some ping pong balls and trim them down to the size of his eyes that I want and use hot glue to put them in place. Also using a piece of brown fur for his eyebrows, I just cut them out and hot glue them across the ping pong ball in place before giving him a little bit of a trim. And then I'm gonna go around and trim his fur a bunch, like even more than this. I noticed that I didn't really like how much fur was on top, so I gave him a little toupee. Now for his pupils, I absolutely love this felt sticker paper that I found that I just cut out with my Cricut machine. It is the perfect pupil every time, and so much easier than trying to cut regular felt and glue it to an eyeball. I just cut out 2 pieces of fabric and then glue them down and then section out the fur into what I think looks like fingers. I backcomb them, I cut them, and I just keep twisting and backcombing them until I think they look good. After he was in place, I realized I really didn't like the trash bag that was part of the trash can, so I actually ripped it up and then re-glued down his hands before cutting out his tongue. Then I painted his tongue a little bit before giving him that weird little center shadow that's in every Jim Henson puppet before putting his tongue in place. And then I glued the lid of the trash can down to his head. Are you guys ready for this cuteness? Look at the baby. He actually turned out way cuter than I thought he would be. One of my best friends actually got me this trash can a couple of years ago, and I've been waiting for a project to do something with it, and look, Krista, it's so cute. So as you can see, the styrofoam ball method works pretty well. He's a really cute little green monster, but this is how it could have happened. It was Mr. Green in the ballroom with the knife. I don't know, I love Clue. After trying to pattern an Oscar head myself, I just decided to buy a pattern from my friend Pasha over at Project Puppet, and I will put their link in the description. I used their melon head puppet pattern because it kind of gave it more of a football type Hey Arnold shape. And it's really easy. All you do is print out the pattern and then trace it on whatever kind of foam you want to use. I used EVA foam 7mm. For the mouth plate, I like to use a thin plastic like with these storage bin containers. I actually got this tip from another YouTuber, Adam, over at Puppet Nerd. His channel is a wealth of information of how to make puppets, and you have to go check it out. It's amazing. I will say though, look how unsatisfying the cut is for these things. I should have took it outside and used my scroll saw or something to cut them out because, man, it was a struggle. Good thing though is that all this art that I do makes my hands super strong. Now I'm just going to use some hot glue to glue this EVA foam into place. I would normally not suggest this. I would suggest going outside and using ventilation and using contact glue, but because this is just a photo puppet and not going to be moving or used, it's perfectly fine to use hot glue. And now I can start tracing out the fabric pieces, like the felt mouth, and of course this beautiful fabric that I got from Puppet Pelts. Another part that saved me so much time, instead of having to boil and dye the fur myself, I just bought it. And here's a way better video of me cutting the fur before pinning it all together. And then I used my sewing machine this time. I usually don't. I usually hand stitch it all together because the seam usually shows with the type of fabric that I use. But with this one, it's so straggly that you'll never see any of the seams. So it's perfectly fine just to use your sewing machine. Matter of fact, for this part, for the mouth, I usually use the sewing machine anyways because it gives such a crisp line that it's just undeniably better. And then I just cut off any extra fabric. Now what I like to do is I glue the mouth plates in place, and all you have to do is line up the registration marks, and I just, again, used hot glue. I do this for both sides of the skull before putting them together using Gorilla Tape. Not duct tape, Gorilla Tape. There is a difference. Now with his mouth taped together, he's starting to give a little bit of an Audrey 2 feel. Does it have to be human? And because this is a photo puppet, I'm going to use wire instead of finger loops inside the mouth plate. I just bend a piece of wire and then tape it into place so that way he can be posed any way I want him to. Now what you have to do is you have to transfer the foam skull into the fabric piece. And you do this by merging mouths. Did anyone else see that Bob's Burgers episode? It's so creepy yet so funny. Anyways, all I'm doing is using hot glue to merge the mouths together. You just want the fabric to sit on the plastic piece as best as possible, and then you can flip the fabric inside out as you're pushing the skull piece into it. And then I just keep working the fabric around the head, and I open up the mouth plate a little bit more. And then I start giving him a really quick trim. You know when like a long-haired dog has hair hanging into its eyes and you have to just trim it out of its eyes? That's what I feel like I'm doing right there. It's just a really quick cut so I can start to see him. And now I'm going to take a ping pong ball and cut it in half. Very hard to cut in half, obviously. And I'm going to cut this ping pong ball in half. Please be careful if you're going to do this because razor blades are, very sharp. Then I take my hot glue gun and I use the heat of it to bend the sides of the ping pong ball so it's more of an oval shape. Then I slowly put hot glue on the inner rim of the ping pong ball before gluing it into place. And I do this because if you put it and it's messy, you'll see that hot glue through the ping pong ball. So just be very aware of where you're putting the glue. And now that we have some creepy eyes, I'm going to move on to his eyebrows, which I just, again, hot glue in place over the ping pong ball and then cut away any of the excess fabric that I don't need. Make sure to do it in 2 pieces of fur, that way they're laying the correct way. Everyone loves a good unibrow. Then I give his unibrow a trim, leaving his fur a little bit longer because I like it that way, before moving on to his body. Similar method as before, where I take a piece of wire, and this trash can actually had this awesome little cross section so I could wrap it around it. And then I pull the wire through the center and use the wire to make kind of a pull in the center of the trash can. That way I have a good structure to slide on a pool noodle, which then I just trim off any of the extra of. This gives a really great foundation for his head to sit on top of, and the pool noodle is perfect because it gives the illusion of an arm in his neck. Now I'm going to remove this step pedal off the trash can because I just don't like it.
I'll be like, I don't like this. What's wrong with it? I don't like it.
Now I get to start trimming away his fur for the final time. And for this part, I'm just going to remove the inner line of hair from his mouth and trim up his beard. I also secure his head to the back of the trash can with 2 holes I drilled and some wire. And now I can move on to his hands. Again, I just rip the backing of the fabric, that way the fur stays intact on the front and it becomes not a huge mess like cutting it would. I'm also going to use hot glue to roll the fabric over to give it a nice edge and cut into the fabric to give him some designated fingies before hot gluing those and rolling over those edges. And now with that done, I can glue his hands in place on the trash can. Same method as I used before, where I just section out pieces of his hair for his fingies. Now I'm gonna slice this piece of foam into a delicious looking piece of bread. No, I'm kidding. It's gonna be for his tongue. Cutting out the foam to a tongue-like shape using scissors and a razor blade. And then I take my Dremel with a sanding pad and just smooth out all the little imperfections. Then I use my trusty Deco Paint Coral Blush, put some in a cup with some water, mix it up, and then kind of dip the foam and squeeze the paint into the foam and squeeze out any excess paint so it doesn't become a hard brick, but just a soft, pillowy colored tongue. Then after it's dry, I just use a Sharpie to make the shadow mark in the middle of the tongue before placing it into his mouth. And I use the felt stickers again for his eyes, using my Cricut machine to cut them out into perfect circles. This is 100% the way to go when you want to cut out any sort of pupils. Definitely use your Cricut machine. It's so much easier and they come out perfect every single time. And then now here I am placing them into his eyes and pushing them down. Now with Oscar mostly done, I can attach him to the wreath. I do this by drilling holes into the trash can and feeding a wire through the trash can into the wreath and tying it down. Now I want to make him a snarky sign that says Scram. This is by far the easiest sign I've ever done. All I had to do was rip cardboard until I liked it and then write the word Scram on it and hot glue it in place. And that's it. I know, I had to pull out all the stops for that sign, right? And then I just started taking garbage that I've been collecting and start putting it on the wreath. I want it to look like he's like living in a trash pile with lots of little different pieces. Like this one I made, it's just a smaller trash bag with some paper in it. I tied it off and cut off half of the trash bag so that way it just looked like a mini little trash bag. I thought it was really cute. But before I continue to finish the wreath, I have to make Oscar's best friend, Slimy. I actually found a tutorial online somewhere that had great tips of how to make him, and I will link that below. But pretty much you just want to cut out a piece of foam into a cylinder long shape like a hot dog and trim it down and sand it so it's nice and smooth and slimy shaped. Then I'm going to show you how I dyed the foam using acrylic paint, but I accidentally dyed it orange first, which I meant to dye it yellow. So I rinsed out the sponge and made sure to get yellow into it instead of orange. And the reason is you would rather paint stripes of a dark color over a light than a light over a dark. Trust me, it's so much easier. And just like his tongue, I just squeeze out any extra paint water. That way it can dry and be nice and fluffy like it is right there. Now I'm gonna feed a piece of wire through the entire lengthwise part of the foam. This is so I can pose Slimy later. I make sure to at least start putting the wire through the bottom half so I can use it for his lower jaw later. And then I clip off any of the extra wires so it doesn't show and slice into the foam with a razor blade for his mouth. And as you can see, I can use the wire on the lower half to move his jaw down and pose it any way I like. Now I can move on to painting the dark orange stripes on him, and this is what I was talking about. It's so much easier to paint a dark color over a light than a light over a dark. And then I also painted the inside of his mouth red and cut out a tiny piece of felt for his tongue. Now I can test the felt tongue to make sure the size is good before I add the shadow mark with a Sharpie and then glue it into place. The next part is actually what I got from that tutorial I talked about, and it's brilliant. It's using puffy paint for his eyes, which is just so smart. You just squeeze it right on and let it dry and it's all done. While Slimy was drying, I decided I wanted to paint some flowers to the same coloring of Slimy so I can represent him a little bit around the wreath as well. I just added some yellow and then spots of orange in the middle. Now while all of that's drying, I'm going to add some green mossy type grouchy floral all around the wreath. I thought this floral was perfect because it matched his fur and gave it more of a dirty vibe. I'm also going to add some other pieces of trash around the wreath and add some more of that cool moss before adding some of these cool slimy flowers. Now the last thing I'm going to do is just glue Slimy in place, and then we're ready for the reveal.
But now it's time for me to tell you what Oscar the Grouch loves, the thing that Grouches love best of all. Oh, I love trash. Anything dirty or dingy or dusty. Anything ragged or rotten or rusty. Yes, I love trash.
And as always, a big thank you to my Patreon coven. You are the worm to my grouch. And like I said, this wreath will be raffled off to one of you in the Patreon coven, so if you want a chance to win, come join us over there. I'll see you grouchy folks soon. Bye!
Ugh, I need some alone time. How about the whole day? Or maybe the whole week, just to play it safe, huh? Now scram!